This week in wrestling history, 36 years ago this week on May 10th, 1985, WWE taped the debut episode of Saturday Night's Main Event from the Nassau Coliseum in Long Island, New York, which aired on NBC the next night with an 8.8 television rating, or more than 10 million viewers in what was normally the time slot for Saturday Night Live. WWE had gone mainstream with the rock and wrestling stuff in the first WrestleMania 2 months earlier, so getting onto network television was a huge deal. It was a big part of Vince McMahon's national expansion, led by Hulk Hogan, who beat Cowboy Bob Orton by DQ on this show and had Mr. T in his corner. Wendy Richter beat the fabulous Moolah to retain her women's title, and Junkyard Dog beat Pete Doherty. JYD had his mother Bertha in his corner in this celebration of Mother's Day. This was Mother's Day weekend. And the two of them danced in the ring when the match was over. Cyndi Lauper was on the show as well, and they aired the premiere of her new music video for the song The Goonies Are Good Enough, which featured a bunch of wrestler cameos from Captain Lou Albano, Classy Freddie Blassie, Rowdy Roddy Piper, the Iron Sheik, Nikolai Volkov, and Moolah. The Goonies were the shit. It's my favorite movie as a kid. I loved everything about Saturday Night's Main Event. Always felt like such a big deal. You put the Goonies together with Saturday Night's Main Event, got yourself a winning combo. The original theme song, by the way, is still the best. Not that I actually liked the second version of the Saturday Night's Main Event music, but nothing's going to beat Obsession by Animotion. And back then, they used a Phil Collins song for the outro. 33 years ago this week, on May 11th, 1988, WWE ran one of their marathon tapings that they used to run back then, but this one may have been the longest. In Rochester, Minnesota, 4 episodes of Wrestling Challenge they taped. When you throw in the dark matches that night, there was an unbelievable total of 31 matches. I mean, that's like 2 episodes of AEW Dark. The longest of which, on the challenge tapings, the longest match of which, I don't have the times on the dark matches, but for the TV matches, it was a Coco Beware match against Rick Renslow, which aired on June 5th. That ran a whopping 3 minutes and 50 seconds. 26 years ago this week, on May 14th, 1995, WWE presented its first ever In Your House pay-per-view from Syracuse, New York, which was launched as a series of 2-hour pay-per-view shows at a reduced price point of $14.95. Before this, we had the Big Four, right? Royal Rumble, WrestleMania, SummerSlam, Survivor Series. The Big Four became the Big Five in 1993 when they added the King of the Ring. Then In Your House followed a couple of years later. The In Your House shows opened the door for them to start doing monthly pay-per-views. And the big hook for the inaugural show was that they would be giving away an actual house in Orlando to one lucky winner, which turned out to be an 11-year-old kid named Matt Pompaselli of Henderson, Nevada. WWE.com caught up with young Matt, I guess now not so young Matt, in 2012 to find out if he was still living in the house. As it turns out, the family sold the house 6 months after he won it. Yeah, I'll bet they did. They probably didn't want to pay the taxes on that thing. I don't blame him. He said they had just moved from New York to Las Vegas, and instead of moving again to Florida, they opted to sell it, banked the money for his college fund, flipped his first house at age 11. It's very impressive. He says it sold for more than $175,000, which wouldn't even buy you the basement of an apartment or a house here in New York. Probably a lot of other places, for that matter. He said the night of the show, when Todd Pettengill dialed the phone number, they dialed the wrong number initially, so their phone didn't ring, but then they tried again, and his dad answered the phone. Bret Hart pulled double duty on the show, wrestling Hakushi in the opener. Very good match. And then Jerry Lawler later in the show, who won with an assist from Hakushi and his manager Shinja. Razor Ramon beat Jeff Jarrett and the Roadie in a handicap match, and while being beaten down after a man that they identified only as a fan ran in to make the save. That man was the debuting Savio Vega, who had been wrestling for them before as Quang. Diesel beat Psycho Sid by disqualification to retain the WWF title when Tatanka interfered and Bam Bam Bigelow made the save, which set up a tag team match for the King of the Ring the following month. Pettengill, by the way, is coming back for the second straight year to host the NXT In Your House event next month on June 13th. I think they should fly Matt Pomposelli down for the show. It's too bad he doesn't still own the house. I think that segment they did on NXT this week where they auctioned off that house with Cameron Grimes, they could have saved that for a TakeOver. And instead you have Grimes offer to buy the house from the kid and then Ted DiBiase outbids him for it. It was a squandered opportunity. The next night, at the Raw taping in Binghamton, New York, Triple H made his Monday Night Raw in-ring debut against John Crystal, winning with his version of a Diamond Cutter or RKO, I guess depending on how old you are, which was a move that was sometimes they referred to on television in the early days of Triple H as this is what they called it, pedigree pandemonium. One person who took note of this was Diamond Dallas Page, who had already started getting the move over in WCW. He credits Johnny Ace and William Regal for helping him come up with it. This is what he told Sports Illustrated in 2017 about getting Triple H to stop using the move. Said, "I'll tell you a great story about Triple H. He was there that day that Johnny Laurinaitis and I were working on it. He was still there in WCW for another 3 or 4 months. Now I'm getting that move over. One night on Raw, because I watched everything they had, he hit a Diamond Cutter out of nowhere and beat somebody. And I thought, oh no, if he does it, it's going to sort of dilute what I'm doing. So I call him. One of the very few times he answered his phone. He's like, hey D, what's up, man? I'm like, I got a favor, bro. He goes, sure, what do you need? I go, no, don't say that. I got no right to ask you this favor. Because Bret Hart had the sharpshooter and Sting had the scorpion deathlock, same move. I said, I saw you did a Diamond Cutter the other night. I think your pedigree's amazing. It's a great finish, but I'm just starting to get that Diamond Cutter over, bro. Was he Vince Russo? I would really appreciate it if you wouldn't do it anymore. Sure, D. He never did it again. And he didn't have to do that. And so ended the short run of pedigree pandemonium in WWE, which he traded in for the double underhook facebuster that he has used ever since. 24 years ago this week, featured a memorable episode of Raw is War on May 12th, 1997. A show where Paul Bearer threatened to reveal a shocking secret about The Undertaker that he vowed to keep while standing over the gravesite of Undertaker's parents. I wonder what that could have been. Farouk asked Vince McMahon when was the last time a black man won the WWF title. He said never, because the white man doesn't feel the black man is worthy of holding the gold. McMahon said it has nothing to do with being black, and Farouk called Undertaker the White Savior. Imagine thinking Undertaker would be called the White Savior when he first debuted with that gimmick in 1990. Had he debuted as the White Savior, I don't think he would have enjoyed the same level of success. ECW's own Rob Van Dam made his Raw debut with Jerry Lawler, dubbing him Mr. Monday Night, and cutting an anti-ECW promo before telling RVD to take care of this little John Bon Jovi wannabe across the ring from him. That John Bon Jovi wannabe was a young man named Jeff Hardy. RVD got some chants of "You Sold Out" from some fans in the audience, which was very amusing given that these fans paid to attend a WWE show. And they're chanting "You Sold Out" at the ECW guy for coming to WWE. And to close out the show, we had Bret Hart in a wheelchair recovering from a knee scope, calling Shawn Michaels out to the ring to tell him how much he hates his guts. I love how Bret always used to call Shawn Michaels by his full name. That's kind of like what they do today in WWE, because they think everybody's a first-time viewer. You never know who's tuning into the show, so you gotta say their full name. Hey, look, it's Vince McMahon, hey, here's my son, Shane McMahon. Here's my daughter, Stephanie McMahon. Maybe in his old age, he did that just to kind of train his brain in case he started to forget his own children. That's one of my theories about that. But all the time, Bret would be, Shawn Michaels, boy toy, like always. Go back and watch those promos in 97. Always. Shawn Michaels, boy toy. So Bret's sitting in his chair. He's healing up on all the American scum in the audience. He said Michaels didn't have the guts to face him at WrestleMania 13. He talked about Michaels posing for girly magazines and getting his navel pierced. He ranted on for so long, they ran out of time before the big payoff and they went off the air. And the following week, they showed a replay of what we missed, which was Bret rising from his chair and Shawn Michaels super kicking him over the chair. The Hart Foundation ran out to beat down Michaels until Stone Cold Steve Austin made the save. This would lead to one of the greatest matches in Raw history. A few weeks later for the tag team titles, Michaels was said to be furious that Bret went on for so long they had to end the show before he got his revenge with the kick. He felt that Bret purposely sabotaged him. Bruce Pritchard has said that the cameramen at ringside were giving cues to Bret, to kind of wrap things up. Bret claims he simply didn't see them. Not that he did it on purpose. But this set the stage for all the problems. I mean, this wasn't the only thing, but this is one of the things that set the stage for all the problems that were yet to come between these two men. 23 years ago this week, on May 14th, 1998, Seinfeld aired its series finale on NBC to the tune of 76 million viewers, and ECW presented It Ain't Seinfeld from the Elks Lodge in Queens, New York. It was on this night that Taz introduced his new FTW title for the first time, which was an old television title they gave to him painted orange, to have him defend while ECW champion Shane Douglas was out nursing an injury, which allowed them to build to a match between the two of them, which they did in January, a guilty as charged, where Taz, for the first time, won the world title. 22 years ago this week, on May 10th, 1999, with WCW Monday Nitro preempted by the NBA playoffs, Monday Night Raw set its all-time ratings record on USA Network with an absolutely ridiculous 8.1 Nielsen rating. I still have a newspaper clipping about this from the New York Daily News. The rating was so big it made headlines in newspapers around the country. 8.1 rating and a 12 share for a total of around 9.2 million viewers. They slaughtered both NBA games that night, which was a 1.2 rating and a 1.4 rating respectively. The show peaked with a 9.1 for the overrun, topping 10 million viewers for a main event of Stone Cold, The Rock, and Vince McMahon against The Undertaker, Triple H, and Shane McMahon. Believe Shawn Michaels may have been the guest referee. But that by far makes it the most watched wrestling match in the history of cable television. A record that I don't really see ever falling. I mean, now with the way that television is so fragmented and you have streaming and all these different channels now that you didn't have back in 99, I don't see how that's ever going to be topped. Speaking of Michaels, he was the commissioner at the time. Commissioner Shawn Michaels was busy on this show playing matchmaker, pitting the Acolytes, Farouk and Bradshaw, against each other, the Mean Street Posse against Pat Patterson and Gerald Briscoe, Paul Bearer against The Big Show, and poor Paul Bearer, he promptly passed out when the match was announced. It's actually one of the funniest moments I can remember from that show. He's in the ring. Obviously, he's scared to death. He doesn't want to wrestle Big Show. He's kind of cowering in the corner. And Paul Bearer with that accent, he's going, I'm not a wrestler. And he's like, I'm not a wrestler. Well, tough shit. You got your ass kicked by the Big Show. Ken Shamrock and Chyna went to a no contest, and Debra beat Sable in an evening gown match to win the WWE Women's Championship after Sable tore off Debra's clothes. which normally would mean Sable would be announced as the winner. But Shawn Michaels said as far as he's concerned, the person who loses their clothes should be the winner. And he awarded the title to Debra. And as you might imagine, there is a story behind this. Why would they do this? This is very dumb. There was a lot of drama going on behind the scenes with Sable at that time. From the WWE side, they would claim that she was becoming increasingly difficult to deal with in the months prior, not wanting to wrestle, even though she was the women's champion. But she felt she wasn't a trained wrestler, and she was afraid of getting hurt. But Sable was legitimately one of the hottest stars in the company at the time, probably second only to Steve Austin. I don't know where The Rock would have been at that point. Popularity-wise, I feel like he wasn't even quite at his peak then. But you could say Austin, Rock, Sable, top three. I don't think that's far-fetched at all. Anybody who was a fan back then knows full well how popular she was, and her segments on TV reflected that. Her segments on TV, she was a ratings mover. The Playboy magazines, which I think at that time were the highest selling of all time. So she got away with a lot because of that. If it was anybody else, they would have buried the shit out of him. But here they came up with this finish that allowed her to not get physical while dropping the title. Now, per the June 14th, 1999 issue of the Wrestling Observer, leading up to this match, Sable suggested losing the title, but not on television, which Vince McMahon outright refused. He said if she didn't show for this edition of Raw to drop the belt, she would be breaching her contract. So she brought her lawyers with her to the show, and she wrote her own terms for dropping the title, which is how we got this dumb finish to this match with Debra. She presented a handwritten contract that night, which her and WWE both agreed to before the show, and Meltzer reprinted this contract as follows. Now, how he got possession of this contract is not explained, but this is what it said. Notwithstanding any, and that's a Vince McMahon word, by the way. Totally a Vince McMahon word. Notwithstanding any agreement between us, and because we disagree about the fashion I would lose my belt, and because of my concerns of humiliation and safety, it is agreed that I appear tonight solely upon your contractual assurances that I will not lose my gown nor wrestle, and that the girl with whom I am interfacing, it's an interesting way of putting it, agrees with her role. My appearance in Manchester shall be no more than parading in the ring and shall not include wrestling. I agree to make a scheduled personal appearance outside the ring. Otherwise, I will have complete hiatus from WWF until May 23rd, at which time we hope to have our contractual concerns resolved. Until such time, neither I nor the WWF, its employees or subcontractors, shall speak disparagingly about the other, scripted or unscripted. After this, WWE pulled all of her merch, canceled all of her promotional appearances. 6 days later, on her final night with the company in Manchester, somebody either defecated in it or otherwise placed feces in her bag, which Sean Waltman later admitted to doing. Well, I appreciate his honesty, if nothing else. A few weeks later, she slapped the company with a $140 million lawsuit, although she later reduced that number, citing allegations of sexual harassment and unsafe working conditions. And on July 22nd, both sides settled out of court, and the terms were never disclosed, although she did come back to the company, because they always do. They always come back. She was no different. 4 years later, she had a brief run in 2003, but Sable did eventually come back to WWE.